I cannot tell you the joy and jubilation that was at Love Field on November 22nd, 1963. We arrived there about 45 minutes to an hour early because we wanted to be on the fence so that when the president came by, we could shake our hands. Mother took me out of school, and all I knew was I was getting out of school. So we went down there, and the president's plane was late. And the first plane that landed, though, was Vice President Johnson. And he was parked in a different section of the terminal, so I didn't get to see him disembark. But I couldn't have had a better shot at seeing President Kennedy and Mrs. Kennedy coming down. And one of the things that I learned subsequently from all the speakers we've had, President Kennedy was well aware that Jackie was more popular than he was. And unlike King Charles, who was jealous of Diana's popularity, President Kennedy made Jackie an asset. And he knew she was popular. So he had her come down first. And I remember all the women standing next to me saying, look at that purse, look at that hat, look at that dress. And I mean, they were just cheering. I cannot tell you that it was just happy moment in my life. We hadn't left Love Field. We were at the corner of Cedar Springs and the exit of Love Field. And in those days, it was kind of a muggy day. Your air conditioner was rolling down the window. And somebody was screaming, turn on your radio, turn on your radio. Something bad has happened. So we did and heard the news. So I hadn't even left Love Field. And it just seemed like minutes before he was here. Anyways, that was, and so my parents saved all the newspapers from that day, and that's what you saw in the video. Our speaker today is Gary Fannin. He's done years of research on Lee Harvey Oswald and the assassination, Jack Ruby, and all the players involved. And his books are for sale in the back, and we will, he's going to make his presentation, and then we'll have question and answers. So it's my honor to introduce Gary Fannin.
Well, as you can tell, I'm from Florida, and I don't get the Weather Channel. But I appreciate everybody dressing up nicely for me tonight. Tom, thank you very much for having me, and thank you everyone for attending. I just want to give you just a quick background. As Tom said, he knew where he was there. I didn't have that opportunity, and the best way I'll describe it is how I got involved with the Kennedy assassination was in 1980 as a sophomore in high school. I had to do a report on a president, and I literally drew JFK's name out of a hat. And the first thing my history teacher said to me was, Gary, are your parents alive? And I said, yeah. And he goes, ask them where they were, because everybody knows where they were. And so I did my little, research. You got to realize in 1980, research was the library, your encyclopedias, some microfilm. That was it. You didn't have the internet. You didn't have all the technology we have today. And so I did my little homework, and I knew it happened on a Friday. I knew Jack Ruby killed Oswald on a Sunday. And so I went home and I asked my mom, I said, Mom, where were you? I said, I have to do a report on President Kennedy. Where were you when President Kennedy was shot? And she goes, I was here watching my soap operas, as they were showing the cut in there of, as the world turns. And growing up in Indiana, we were not a wealthy family, but we did have a live-in nanny that stayed with us Sunday night through Friday, because in the 60s, both of my parents worked, which was an unusual, thing at the time. And so, I asked her, I said, if you were home watching your soap opera when they announced that Kennedy had been shot, I said, why weren't you at work? Because we had our live-in nanny. And she said to me, she goes, well, I just got back from the doctor and found out I was pregnant with your ass. So I was my mom found out she was pregnant with me the day Kennedy was killed. And that started my lifelong trek, almost 43 years ago now, of researching the Kennedy assassination. And again, until I came to Dallas for the first time in 1987, I really didn't have much of a thought on it. I still believed Oswald was a shooter, but I wrote my report saying he had an accomplice because of the eyewitness testimony of different shots from different directions. But in 1987, I came here for the first time, and I was actually standing in the sixth floor sniper's window. This was before it was a museum. And when I'm standing there, I'm just, I'm looking and I'm like, okay, if the car comes down Main Street, turns right on Houston, if I'm Oswald, why wouldn't I shoot him right here? There's nothing obstructing my view. He's just getting closer if I miss the shot. Why would I wait until he turns onto Elm Street, goes downhill, turns to the left, then to the right, through foliage? The further he gets away from me, the more difficult the shot. And I was just like, I don't necessarily believe what I've been told in my history books. And so the beautiful thing about 1987 is we had a thing called the phone book. And I literally went to the corner of, I think it was Houston and Maine, and looked up the phone book. And sure enough, I just started flipping through, and the first name I looked up, Jim Lavelle, he was there. And I called Jim up right there, told him who I was interested in the Kennedy assassination. Can I come out and talk to him? And he said, sure, come on. Because the beautiful thing about a phone book, not only did it give you their phone number, it gave you their address. And I left there, and I think I went to either Target or Walmart, and I bought a map of Dallas so I could find his residence. And I bought a little cheapy cassette recorder so I could just record my conversation with him. And ever since 1987, I have interviewed hundreds of thousands of people. I don't even know the number. When I say I've interviewed everybody, obviously I haven't, but to give you an idea, I interviewed Tom Robinson, who embalmed JFK. I've interviewed Paul Grudy, who embalmed Oswald. I personally know Marina Oswald. Several people that have spoken here, Robert Groden and so forth, that I know. Like I said, I've talked to CIA, FBI, Dallas Police, Secret Service, anybody you can think of, I've talked to them. And so what I'm going to do tonight is I'm going to show you basically my belief, and I'm not trying to convert you. If you don't believe it, that's fine, but I'm just going to show you that the first book that I wrote was called The Innocence of Oswald, and if you actually follow the paper trail, Oswald was 100% innocent. Okay? My second book with my co-author Tim Brennan in the back literally just came out today. It's called JFK Marked for Death. And what that book is who stood to lose had JFK lived to serve a second term. And it's basically about the people and the agencies that everybody, all who had something to lose if JFK had lived. So this presentation is based upon those two books and my almost 43 years of research. So if I can figure out this little clicker, we'll have a little bit of fun. Okay, so what we were told what happened was Oswald acted alone, shot and killed President Kennedy and Officer J.D. Tippit. Jack Ruby also acted alone in killing Oswald 2 days later. Lyndon Johnson appointed the Warren Commission, and the Warren Commission concluded that Oswald and Ruby each acted independently. This is obviously Jim Lavelle in the tan suit when Oswald was shot. Like I said, I met Jim in, I think it was August of '87, and I actually went to Jim's funeral in September of 2019. I don't know if you know, but he passed away at the age of 99. Was still sharp as a tack. Don't get me wrong, him and I were friends, but he always believed that Oswald was guilty of something. That's a picture of me and Jim 3 months before he passed away at his house up in Garland. Okay, so one of the first things that Jim told me as the lead investigator when I interviewed him in August of '87 was he said, had we gone to trial on what we had on Lee Harvey Oswald, he would have not have been found guilty. Okay, and that always kind of struck me as a little bit odd. Here's a guy that thinks he's guilty, but at the same time, he's the guy investigating the case, and he says, we didn't have enough evidence. He would have been found innocent. And Howard Brennan is the person that gave the description of Lee Harvey Oswald in the southeast corner of the 6th floor of the Texas School Book Depository. His description was a white male, 30 years old, slender build, 5'10", 165 pounds. He gave this description while he was standing on the street at the corner of Elm and Houston, looking up at the 6th floor window. There's 3 people in this picture, and besides their ethnicity, who here can tell me how tall they are and how much they weigh? You have no way of knowing. In 1970, Chief Jesse Curry did his autobiography, and he said that after Oswald was sent to his cell, the enormity of the day finally hit him, and he said the case was far from closed, but we did have a suspect with a large amount of evidence linking him to the assassination. Well, I want to show you the evidence that they had. Again, this is Howard Brennan on the right. The white circle is where he was standing. And again, he's looking up at circle A, and he's looking, and that's where he gave the description of Lee Harvey Oswald. Okay? Even though he had his glasses with him at the time, at the ID at the police station, he didn't have them here. He was not able to pick Oswald out of a lineup. Okay, so what happened? The Dallas police just exercised their lineup a little bit to the point that, well, let's make it a little bit easier to pick out who we want here. The 2 guys in the suits are actually Dallas police officers, and the guy on the far right, I believe, was a janitor at the Dallas Municipal Building. And Oswald was very upset that the fact that he goes, everybody else here is wearing a nice shirt, and I'm in a torn T-shirt. And here's the thing. They had these guys step forward and give their name and where they worked at. Now, this is 7 o'clock in the evening. At 7 o'clock in the evening, everybody in the world had heard of Lee Harvey Oswald and the Texas School Book Depository. So how hard would it be when Oswald has to stand forward and say, I'm Lee Harvey Oswald, I work at the Texas School Book Depository. How hard would it be to pick him out of a lineup? Okay. Additional evidence that was ignored. Barbara and Earl Rowland were on Houston Street, and they admitted to seeing 2 people in the southwest corner, the opposite corner. One of the individuals was standing behind him and appeared to be African American, and one guy had a gun. They thought they were either security or Secret Service. Okay, again, this would be evidence of additional shooters since no Secret Service personnel were in Dealey Plaza before or during the motorcade, only after the assassination occurred. However, there were people in Dealey Plaza posing as Secret Service agents with badges. Okay, this right here just shows you further evidence proving that Oswald was not involved in the shooting of J.D. Tippit. This came out at 1:40 p.m., and this is, again, directly from Chief Curry's book. And it says, Sergeant Hill said, shells at the scene indicate the suspect is armed with an automatic .38 rather than a pistol. Oswald only owned a .38 revolver. The bullets on the left is what Oswald's gun shot, not the bullets on the right. They're not interchangeable. Okay? The shell casings of the automatic were automatically ejected at the scene, and there were 2 bullet casings from a revolver at the scene as well. Here's my question. If Oswald's a shooter, why would he empty the gun and leave evidence behind? He could have emptied that gun anywhere along Jefferson Avenue, thrown them in a trash can. Why would he do it right there at the crime scene if he was a shooter? Okay, Oswald didn't own a .38 automatic. Either he had an accomplice or he wasn't involved in the Tippit shooting at all. And again, on autopsy, through Dr. Earl Rose, Tippit had 2 different types of bullets in his body, 2 .38 automatics, 2 .38 revolvers from 2 different manufacturers. It just didn't add up. Oswald allegedly owned a 6.5 Mannlicher Carcano, which he ordered under his alias Alex J. Heidel in March of '63 from Klein Sporting Goods. The type of rifle that was found in the school book depository building immediately after the shooting was not a 6.5 Mannlicher Carcano. This is an affidavit signed by Seymour Weitzman. And on that affidavit, again, it shows here in close-up, the rifle was a 7.65 Mauser bolt action equipped with a .418 scope, a thick leather brownish black sling on it. The rifle was between some boxes near the stairway. Okay, so this is not even the gun that Oswald owned, and the press reported for 36 hours that the gun that was used was a 7.65 German Mauser. When the police couldn't tie the German Mauser to Oswald, all of a sudden it morphed into a 6.5 Mannlicher Carcano. This is, at the very top here, this is the order sheet that Oswald ordered from Klein Sporting Goods for the gun. And you can see it says C20 T750, A. Heidel, his P.O. Box, Dallas, Texas. And then, again, the ad is at the bottom showing you the C20 T750, 36 inches long, 1995. This is what he ordered. And it shows you here where the clips are on the bottom of the rifle. The one on the bottom left here is on the stock or the handle of the gun. And then that's on the front on the far right. But again, it shows the clips on the bottom. So this is where he could put the sling or the rifle sling to carry the rifle. The problem is, again, this is a backyard photograph showing that the strap's in the same location on the bottom of the gun. But the problem is, on the far right, is the gun that they took out of the school book depository building. The straps are on the side of the weapon. They're not on the bottom. So even if this was a 6.5 Mannlicher Carcano that they claimed Oswald owned, it doesn't match up with the backyard photographs or what he ordered. Again, there's a close-up of it. And then this is Lieutenant Day at the Identification Bureau. Again, you can see where the straps are mounted on the side of the gun. Again, not what Oswald ordered or owned. Again, there's Jim. And again, besides Jim telling me that we didn't have enough evidence to find him guilty, this right here is from the Men Who Killed Kennedy documentary from 1988.
The Dallas officer in charge of the Tippit murder investigation was retired Detective James Lavelle, who was one of the first to interrogate Oswald.
His demeanor was awfully calm. I know that I could not have answered the questions in the same manner that he did had I actually been guilty of killing two people.
Did you kill the president?
No, I've not been charged with that. In fact, nobody has said that to me yet.
Okay, at that time right there, that is at Oswald's midnight press conference. He had not been charged with killing the president as of yet, even though the press reported to him after he said that comment, "I've not been charged with that." They said, "You have been charged." And he said, "What?" He goes, "You have been charged." Okay, so the Dallas police informed the press that Oswald was going to be charged with the assassination of the president before they even told Oswald. He was not arraigned for that, for the murder of President Kennedy until 1:30 in the morning, an hour and a half after this press conference. So that's why he's kind of startled there. And then to go one step further, the FBI came in and basically took over the investigation, which is kind of ironic because the FBI did not have jurisdiction. It was not a federal crime to assassinate the president in 1963. So they stepped in, demanded all the evidence from Chief Curry and Captain Fritz, and they did a report. I'm sorry. Oh, I need to go back here. They did a report the very next day. You can see where it says November 23rd up here at the top, signed by J. Edgar Hoover. And one of the things in the report is scraping from inside surface of the windshield. Well, they told us Oswald shot at President Kennedy from behind. The reason why they're doing a scraping of the inside surface of the windshield is for fragmentation. In other words, a bullet came from the front to the rear of the car. Right there's your bullet hole. This is also the only motorcade that President Kennedy's personal physician, Admiral Berkeley, was not seated in the front seat between the two Secret Service agents. In 3 years of his motorcade, this is the only time he was not in that position. If he had been in that position, he would have been the one struck with that bullet. This is the best part. This is page 4, the very bottom. And again, this is the FBI report. And they're talking about the weapons at this point. It says, the latent prints appearing in the photograph taken of the rifle by the Dallas Police Department are too fragmentary and indistinct to be of any value for identification purposes. Photographs of this weapon taken by this bureau, the FBI, also failed to produce prints of sufficient legibility for comparison purposes. And on page 5, no latent prints of value were developed on Oswald's revolver, the cartridge cases, the unfired cartridge, the clip in the rifle, or the inner parts of the rifle. This is the FBI the day after the assassination admitting we don't have fingerprints on either of the two weapons that he supposedly used to kill President Kennedy and Officer Tippit. Anybody else that had been arrested would have been let go at that point for no evidence. They kept him there. Jack Ruby killed him the next day. So Oswald is still being detained by the Dallas police. They're admitting they don't have any fingerprints on the rifle he allegedly used. Again, the rifle found was a 7.65 German Mauser, not the 6.5 Mannlicher Carcano. Even if it was his rifle, the clips are in different positions. The bullet casings at the scene don't match what's on autopsy or the shell casings found on the police report. The Rowlands identified two people, one African-American in the opposite corner of the window. Their primary witness, Howard Brennan, could not identify Oswald in a lineup, and they relaxed their standards for the second lineup. So what evidence did they have to keep him there? Chief Curry said he had, a pretty tight case. I'm not an attorney. I think I could have got the guy off. Here's how the fingerprints were actually obtained that proved that he had the rifle. Here we go.
Determined efforts by the Dallas police and the FBI in Washington had still failed to tie the prized rifle to Oswald. However, a smudged palm print was discovered on the weapon hours after a mysterious visit to the funeral home where Oswald's body had been taken by mortician Paul Grudy.
I had gotten to the funeral home with his body something in the neighborhood of 11 o'clock at night, and it is a several-hour procedure to prepare the remains. And after this time, someplace in the early morning, agents came. Now, I say agents because I'm not familiar at the moment with whether they were Secret Service or FBI or what they were, but agents did come, and when they did come, they fingerprinted, and the only reason that we knew they did,
again, it just, no big deal. But again, agents came to the funeral home and fingerprinted and palm printed Oswald in the middle of the night on the 24th. That's when all of a sudden the FBI and the Dallas police find a smudged palm print on the inner parts of the rifle that they just told you in an FBI report that it wasn't there. Okay? Paul Grudy inadvertently gave the FBI the fingerprints they needed to convict Oswald. How many of you are familiar with the pains? Okay. A few of you are familiar with the pains? Okay. The relationship between the Oswalds and the Paynes. They were both separated, allowing Marina to move in with Ruth. And it's ironic because Ruth claimed that she took Marina in so that she could help her with the English, yet at the same time, Marina could help her with her Russian. Well, what she didn't tell the Warren Commission was she taught a collegiate class in 1957 in Pennsylvania in the Russian language. Okay, she was already fluent in Russian. She wasn't having Marina there to help her with her Russian. The Paynes were married in 1957, had 2 children. Oswalds were married in 61, also had 2 children. Ruth Payne introduced the Oswalds and the de Mohrenschildts. Are you familiar with George de Mohrenschildt? Okay. You would think Oswald is supposed to be lower class. He's making $1.25 an hour, so he's making $2,600 a year. The Paynes are supposedly middle class. He works for Bell Helicopter. And the de Mohrenschildts were very affluent, very high society, were members of the Dallas Petroleum Club with President George H.W. Bush. So why would someone of a lower class level, a middle class level, and an upper class level, why would they all be, quote, friends and hanging out? Okay, well, for one, the Paynes weren't as middle class as you want to believe. And what I say by that is in my research, I found out in March of 1960, Michael Payne's grandmother passed away, and she was a descendant of the Forbes family. And she left all 15 of her grandchildren an inheritance that once they turned 21, they got this money. Well, Michael was already 31. They all 15 grandchildren received an endowment of $269,000 in 1960, equivalent to about $2.7 million today. Okay, so the Paynes try to act like they're middle class. They were anything but middle class. I don't know about anybody else here, but if I have $2.7 million in my pocket, I'm sorry, I'm not going to Burger King. Like I said, the Paynes were actually wealthy, not middle class as they portrayed. And again, the inheritance is of $269,000. And, there's numerous other connections with the CIA, with the Paynes. Ruth Payne's sister was a CIA agent. Michael Payne had applied before. It was never proven that he was CIA, even though his father and Ruth Payne's father both worked for companies that were CIA front companies. And again, this just shows you the $269,000. Again, their connections to the CIA. Ruth Payne's father, William Avery Hyde, insurance executive, worked for the USAID, which was a front company for the CIA. Ruth Payne's brother-in-law, John Hoke, was also employed by the USAID and applied to the CIA. His wife was already working for the CIA. Michael's mother, also named Ruth, was married to Arthur Young, who received a patent from Bell Aircraft for the helicopter that would be later used in Korea and Vietnam. Michael Payne's mother was best friends with Mary Bancroft. She was having an affair with both Allen Dulles and Henry Luce of Time Life magazine. And Henry Luce was also a CIA agent. Anybody here familiar with how Henry Luce purchased the Zapruder film? They bought the rights to the Zapruder film for $100,000 and then went back the next day and paid an additional $50,000 for the film rights. So they have the picture rights for Life magazine, Time magazine, and they have the film rights to show it. It was never shown until Robert Groden showed it on Late Night America, March 6, 1975. They had no intentions of ever showing the Zapruder film, okay? The images that they printed in Life magazine, they actually printed out a sequence to make it look like a shot had came from the rear. So they falsely portrayed the shots coming from the rear instead of also from the front. And how Robert Groden got involved with the Zapruder film was in 1969, Abraham Zapruder was diagnosed with terminal stomach cancer. And at that point, he's like, what I'm most famous for, we don't have a copy of the film for my family. And so he basically reached out to Time Life and said, can I get a copy? I don't need the original. I sold you those rights. Can I get a copy of the film? And so Time Life decided, well, he should have a copy. we should have a backup copy, and they should have a copy for the National Archives. And the company that they hired, EFX, out of New York City, Mo Weitzman owned that particular company, and he made another copy for himself and gave it to Robert Groden in 1969. And Groden basically, from 1969 to 1975, worked from taking that 8mm film and blowing it up to a 35mm film. And he stabilized the imagery. It's now called Groden scoping, but he didn't alter the film. He just cropped it to the point that the car was constantly in a single moving image. Because when Abraham Zapruder was actually filming the assassination, when the shots were fired, he literally was startled and jumped, and so the framing, goes out of sequence. I mean, not out of sequence, but just jumps a little bit. So that's how Groden got involved with it. Ruth Payne's actions on November 21st and 22nd. She admitted in her Warren Commission testimony and on the men who killed Kennedy that she had gone grocery shopping the afternoon when Lee arrived at their house on Thursday afternoon. She left her home on 11/22, left the television on, and again went grocery shopping again, took her 2 children, ages 2 and 4, to the dentist. Even though there was no information being broadcast on the television news regarding Oswald's arrest, Ruth Payne allowed the Dallas police and deputy sheriffs to search their place without a warrant. When they showed up at 2:45, she said, "Come on in, I've been expecting you." Okay, there's nothing been on the local news that Oswald has been arrested. He was arrested at 1:40 in Oak Cliff. It takes about 25 minutes to get downtown for the police station. They did not take him immediately and book him. They actually took him into homicide and the robbery bureau and started questioning him. So they didn't actually fingerprint him or book him until later on. But immediately at that point, they sent 6 Dallas deputy sheriffs and Dallas detectives to Ruth Payne's house. And again, when they showed up at 2:45, she said, "Come on in, I've been expecting you." Why? There was over 100 people that worked at the Texas School Book Depository building. Why was Oswald the shooter? Claimed she didn't know that he was keeping a rifle at her house, despite her Warren Commission testimony. Her testimony, and I've got, has anybody here been to the Payne Museum out in Irving? Okay, it's recreation, and I've got a picture of the recreation here. But in her Warren Commission testimony, she said she didn't know that Oswald even owned a rifle. And again, in her Warren Commission testimony, she also said that she went grocery shopping again on Saturday and Sunday. I'm a child of the 60s. People didn't go grocery shopping 4 days in a row. Housewives went on the weekends when their husband was at home so they could watch the kids. They didn't go Thursday, they didn't go Friday, they didn't go Saturday, they didn't go Sunday. And also, of all the thousands of people that were interviewed for the Warren Commission, Ruth Payne has the most testimony of anybody, and she only knew the Oswalds for 9 months. Her Warren Commission testimony is 91 pages long. I couldn't tell you 91 pages about my brother. This is the note that she signed to give the Dallas police permission to search the house. They found the hands-off Cuba flyers, some camera equipment that Oswald owned. Again, he made $2,600 a year. He had over $3,000 worth of photographic equipment, okay, at the time. There's the wood blocks. There's the blanket that covered Lee's rifle, and there's the can over there that she would lacquer the blocks after she chiseled them out. But she stepped over that blanket every day and didn't know there was a gun there. I kind of find that hard to believe.
In Ruth Payne's Warren Commission testimony, she goes into great detail about the contents in her garage and how often Marina and Lee used the garage. She remembers that Lee would usually forget to turn off the lights in any room, while Marina would always turn off excess lighting. During her 91-page testimony, Ruth Payne describes spare pieces of wood which she would use to make building blocks for her children. Mrs. Payne also talks about the lacquer she would use to coat the learning blocks after she had finished carving them. Although Mrs. Payne claims she had no idea Lee Oswald was hiding a rifle in her garage, these photos, even though they are recreations, show the absurdity of Mrs. Payne's claim. Ruth Payne would have to literally walk past the rifle and other possessions of Lee Oswald's in order to get to her materials. Ruth Payne also claims in her 91-page testimony that on the day of the assassination, she left with her 2 infant children at 9 a.m. for their dentist appointments. She also claimed in The Men Who Killed Kennedy that she shopped for groceries.
And he arrived, actually, I was out of the house when he arrived. I was grocery shopping. Bought a lot of groceries.
Ruth Payne left her television on, although Marina was not yet awake, and did not return home until approximately 3.5 hours later after the assassination. In her testimony, she still claims to go grocery shopping again on Saturday and Sunday. The director of this documentary film does not believe Ruth Payne's testimony. In 1963, very few children under the age of 4 had dental appointments, especially on a Friday or weekend. Also, housewives in the 1960s generally would only go grocery shopping 1 day a week, not every day, and usually on weekends when their husbands could watch the children.
My feeling is that the Paynes and the George T. Moore children were all, at one time or another, controllers of Lee Oswald.
Anybody else think Michael Payne looks a little bit like Lee Harvey Oswald? Okay, there were rumors that Oswald, was test driving cars even though he didn't have a license, that he was shooting at other people's targets at shooting ranges. I firmly believe that could have very easily have been Michael Payne. And another interesting thing about Michael and Ruth Payne, they were separated, in 63. They didn't actually get divorced, I think, until like 67. But he was a loyal puppy to Ruth Payne. I mean, he followed her all around the country. Wherever Ruth moved to, Michael moved to as well. He followed her back to Pennsylvania. He followed her down to Tampa. He followed her out to Santa Rosa, California. Wherever Ruth went, Michael went. And I understand, maybe he had, affections for his ex-wife, but I mean, I've got an ex-wife that I've never talked to in, let's just say, a few years. Okay, conclusions involving the Payne's role. Again, Michael could have been impersonating him by driving the cars, being at the shooting range. Ruth Payne had nearly 3.5 hours on November 22nd to deliver Lee's rifle to the Dallas Police Department. This would make, them not finding his gun there that afternoon at 2:45, and would also explain why she knew so much about the Oswalds in her Warren Commission testimony after only 9 months. Anybody familiar with Roscoe White? Roscoe White is the shooter of JFK, by the way. Who was he? That's Roscoe there. Okay. What do we know about Lee Harvey Oswald and Roscoe White's relationship? They were both in the Marines together. Both left the USS Bexar in San Diego and ended up in Japan. They both worked for U.S. intelligence in analyzing photographs of the U-2 spy planes, photographs over the Soviet Union. Both had the highest level you could get, security-wise, confidential. Roscoe White was hired by the Dallas Police Department as a photographic expert on October 7th, 1963. Now think about this for a second. He's hired as a photographic expert October 7th, 1963. How many crimes do you think people actually took pictures of in 1963 when they were happening? It's not like today where everybody's got a camera. Okay. Oswald was hired at the school book depository a week later. Oswald was killed by Jack Ruby. Roscoe White would resign from the DPD 2 years later, and he died in a highly suspicious chemical fire on September 24th, 1971. This right here is Roscoe showing his Marine discharge, and the important thing I want to point out is the number 1666106, because 11 years after Roscoe's death in 1971, his son Ricky was snooping around his grandparents' house in Paris, Texas, and he came across a box of items, let's just say. And some of the, well, here, I'll just let him explain it to you.
In 1982, Ricky White was searching through a family home in Paris, Texas, when he discovered items which would change his life and lead to nearly 7 years of soul-searching research. Ricky had accidentally stumbled upon contents that his father, Roscoe Anthony White, had hidden at least 11 years prior to his death in September 1971. Photographs, a journal, a diary, and 3 decoded cables were all found inside this canister. All of these clues led to Ricky's own conclusion.
My father was involved in the Kennedy assassination.
Okay, so that's Ricky saying his father was involved in the Kennedy assassination. Again, he found these documents in this canister in 1982. Okay, he did not turn them over to anybody until he turned them over to Gary Shaw at the JFK Assassination Information Center in 1989. This book right here, this is at the Pogue Library on the campus of Baylor University. Gary Shaw has the rights to all of Roscoe White's belongings now. And this little green book right here was what Roscoe called his Witness Elimination Program book. And what it has in it, I've had my hands on the book. It's just newspaper articles inside of this book. And this book is tiny, maybe that big. But it's newspaper articles, and anytime somebody that either he killed or died, like Ruby killing Oswald, he would simply just mark a line through their photograph in that particular book. And I interviewed Jack Shaw, who was Roscoe White's pastor, and because Roscoe admitted on his deathbed that he had killed 28 people between 1963 and 1971 to cover up the assassination of JFK. And when I asked Pastor Shaw about this, you know, as a pastor and just like an attorney, you have, you know, certain privileges you're not, you know, you don't have to disclose. But I said, you know, he admitted to this, and what Jack Shaw said to me was, well, that number sounds about right. So he didn't deny it. He didn't say, yeah, I agree. But he just said that number sounds about right. And that's all the proof that I needed to know that, you know, this was probably true. One of the pictures that he found in that canister was his mom, Geneva White, who just happened to work for this guy on the left for a few weeks in September of 1963. This is one of the pictures on the far left of Ruby shooting Oswald. And the blow up over here, it's hard to read, but it says, "Setup job, Ruby was brave." This is a undated photograph of Roscoe with 3 other companions. And the reason why I show you this photograph is because if you look how Roscoe is standing, looks very similar to the way Lee Harvey Oswald stands in the backyard photographs. And this particular image here in the middle, this is called the ghost image. This was found in the Dallas police files in 1975, 12 years after the assassination, 4 years after Roscoe had died. But what was Roscoe's job with the Dallas Police Department? Photographic expert. Okay, and I've interviewed Marina. This picture, she admits to taking these pictures of Oswald. She said she took pictures at the Neely Street address. But she said, I was standing underneath the stairs. He was on the fence. Well, in the photograph, he's on the stairs. Okay, I thoroughly believe this photograph is Roscoe White, basically from the bottom lip down with Lee Harvey Oswald at the top. This was 3 cables, and again, if you get permission from Gary Shaw and you go to the Pogue Library at Baylor, you can get your hands on these. They were photocopied in 1990 Today, the last time I saw them was 2015. They were barely legible then. But these 3 decoded cables is what ties Roscoe White to the assassination of President Kennedy, and at the same time ties our government into ordering the assassination. It's hard to see, but in the very corner up here, the plastic was clipped, and this piece of paper was clipped right here. When they were given this at the Assassination Information Center, they actually had this paper and plastic tested by both 3M and IBM, and they said that that paper plastic stock was late 1962, early 1963. The first cable, again, is from Navy Intelligence 166106. Again, that's Roscoe White's Marine identification number. September 63, he went by the code name of Mandarin. Dallas destination chosen, your place hidden within the department, okay? This is not Dallas location chosen, we're going to kill JFK in Dallas. This was them putting Roscoe White on the police force. Somebody at Navy Intelligence called the Dallas Police Department, and either through Chief Curry or Will Fritz or the HR manager got this guy hired on to be a police officer. The second letter, October 63, the original had a typo. It said OTC instead of OCT, so they scratched it out and put OCT. But again, Navy Intelligence 166-106. Foreign affairs assignments have been canceled. The next assignment is eliminate a national security threat to worldwide peace. Destination will be Houston, Austin, or Dallas. Contacts being arranged now, orders subject to change at any time. This is Navy Intelligence saying, we're not going to kill Fidel Castro. Foreign affairs assignments have been canceled. We're going to kill JFK. And finally, December 63, stay within the department. Witnesses have eyes, ears, and a mouth. You had nothing to do with the mix-up. The men will be in to cover all misleading evidence soon. Okay, so again, they're telling him to stay on the police force because eyewitnesses are going to come forward and say, well, that's not what I saw. And I don't have it in this presentation, but I find it very interesting. How many people watched the news footage of Walter Cronkite that day when he said, 3 shots were fired on President Kennedy? Okay, most of your eyewitnesses in Dealey Plaza said between 3 and 6 shots. How did Walter Cronkite know 10 minutes after the assassination there was only 3 shots, the same amount that the Warren Commission would find out 10 months later? There's your Snow White and the 7 Dwarfs right there. That would be the Warren Commission.
Ricky White did a lot of soul searching for nearly 7 years before giving Gary Shaw and the Kennedy Assassination Information Center the documents, photographs, and cables. Talking with his mother, Geneva, helped to verify the information he had discovered in 1982. With Gary Shaw's research and more documentation, Ricky had to learn to accept that his father was the killer of President Kennedy and was simply carrying out orders from the Office of Naval Intelligence.
It still hurts me to an extent, but I look at the fact that what my father did was he was asked upon and did as a soldier, and that's the way that I've accepted it.
Okay, the night before Roscoe White shot JFK and killed Officer Tippit, he admitted to his wife, Geneva, I've been ordered to kill President Kennedy tomorrow. And she's like, there's no way, you can't go through with this. And he's like, well, obviously they know more than we do. And if I don't go through with it, they're going to kill me, they're going to kill you, they're going to kill our boys. So that's what happened. Okay, and again, here's your backyard photographs. There's the ghost image. Okay, again, right here, if you look at the mugshot of Oswald, he's got more of a rounded, pointed chin, not a squared chin. And I put the purple line in here to just show you the crop marks, but the little shadow line that you see going across there, that's crop marks on the photograph. Again, I think the backyard photograph is from here down is Roscoe White and Lee Harvey Oswald at the top. And you know, when he was arrested and they showed this backyard photograph to Oswald, he said, "It's a fake, and I can prove to you it's a fake." Obviously, he never got his day in court to do that. This right here is where I just took Roscoe's chin and put it on Oswald's face.
Lee Oswald, who's been rewarded for his work in Russia, in the government's behalf, by being given training as an expert photographer. When they arrested him, he had over $3,000 worth of camera equipment, so he was no ordinary photographer.
According to Dallas Police Captain Wilfred's own notes, he showed the famous backyard photograph to Oswald during the 12 hours of interrogation. And Oswald said, "It's a fake, and I can prove it, and I will prove it in time."
Shortly after Oswald's arrest, Dallas police found 2 backyard photographs showing Oswald proudly posed with 2 communist newspapers, a rifle, and a pistol. Stephen Jaffe, a photographic analyst and investigator for Jim Garrison, confirmed for Garrison what Oswald did not live to prove himself.
Whoever framed Oswald evidently used only one picture of his face and planted it on someone else's body. Then, to give the face on the right a different look, it seems they airbrushed some of the facial features and tilted the head slightly. And in doing so, they tilted the shadow under his nose. That it was one face is easily demonstrated. If you take the face on the right and superimpose it over the face on the left, the features line up. But when you slide the face back, you see that it had to be tilted. The second and more obvious proof is with the position of the body. The body on the right seems to be closer to the camera. If so, the head should be larger. However, you can see when you slide it over the face on the left, the faces are the same size. This means the body should be the same height. They are not.
News of Oswald's arrest flashed around the world immediately.
This is one of my favorite quotes. This was the first cabinet meeting that Ronald Reagan had when he became president in February of '81. And he had all of his cabinet members come in and said, he asked each one of them independently, "What's your agenda during my first term?" And this is what William Casey said: "We'll know our disinformation program is complete when everything the American public believes is false." Okay? In my opinion, the dumbing down of America is complete. And what I mean by that is, just out of a show of hands here, we got about 40 or 50 people. Besides 60 Minutes, name a news magazine TV show that's on TV right now. What's that? Newsmax? Okay. But an actual program, like 60 Minutes, 2020, Dateline. Okay? Now, let me ask you this. How many of you here can name a reality show? I mean, out of this audience, we could probably come up with 200 reality shows, but we only got 3 shows for intelligence. I have some unique insights, or whatever you want to call it. And I also have a unique item here with me tonight in case you're interested. This is a ring that Lee Harvey Oswald was buried in, and I now own it. In 1981, when his body was exhumed, Marina said to Paul Grudy, the mortician that you saw in the video, she goes, "I want the wedding ring back." She put her wedding ring on his finger graveside, and actually this ring as well. And so when they exhumed his body, they took it to Baylor University Hospital here in Dallas, and Paul had to be there because he had to verify that this was the clothing and the jewelry that he put on the corpse, because they didn't know how decomposed the body was going to be after 18 years. And so once the body was discovered and taken out of the casket, Paul sent his wife, Virginia, to go tell Marina there's a body in the casket, because that was her concern. She thought that his body had been stolen. And so Paul takes the 2 rings off and goes to give it to Marina, and again hands him this ring. And Marina says, "I don't want that ring. He bought that in the Soviet Union before he met me." She goes, "I don't want that ring." So Paul just stuck it back in his pocket. And he had every intention of just, once they were done with the second autopsy, he would put the ring back on the corpse and, they'd bury the body. Well, the casket was so dilapidated, they ordered a new casket, and they put Lee's remains in the new casket and sealed it before Paul could put this ring back on. And so Paul just stuck it in his pocket, and he tells his wife, Virginia, later that week, "I'm just going to wait a week or two, and I'm going to go out to the grave site, and I'm going to dig down about a foot or two, and I'm going to throw the ring in there, and I'll be done with it." And they were deeply religious people, and she says, "You understand, of course, that if you get caught doing that, you're going to prison for grave robbery." And so Paul held on to this ring for 24 years and gave it to a researcher friend of mine in 2005. And in 2019, my co-author and I, Tim Brennan, and I bought this ring. Like I said, I have some very unique items, and I'm going to be purchasing some more unique items while I'm here. I'm going to purchase the stamp that was used to sign President Kennedy's death certificate, the Alkin 6 photograph, which is one of the most famous photographs of the assassination, several other items while I'm here. Scott, would you mind going back to the author's table back there and just manning the table for a couple minutes? I want to have Tim come up for the Q&A. And again, guys, my book on the Lee Harvey Oswald, The Innocence of Oswald, again, this is all based upon government documents from the FBI, the CIA, the Secret Service, the Office of Naval Intelligence, Dallas police reports, Dallas affidavits, Dallas autopsy reports. If you follow the paper trail, Lee Harvey Oswald is 100% innocent. Okay? My newest book with my co-author is called JFK Marked for Death. And what it is about is the people and the agencies that stood to lose something of value to them had JFK been reelected and served a second term. So there's chapters in there on the mafia, on the FBI, the CIA, the military-industrial complex, Secret Service, Dallas Police, Lyndon Johnson, even Lee Harvey Oswald, even though that chapter is only 1 page long. So I thank you all very much for coming out. If you have any questions, I'd be glad to help answer those for you with Tim. And if anybody wants to see the ring or put it on, as long as the ring doesn't leave my sight, you're more than welcome to.
I'll put it on, but I'll leave your sight. Tim, why don't you have a seat and Gary have a seat, and I'll go to the audience, but I'm going to ask the first few questions. One of the... Can you put this on for me, Tom? It's on. It's on? Okay. But hold it consistently. Okay. One of the most striking evidence that you present is the fact that there were 2 bullets found in Officer Tippett's body, and which clearly suggest a second shooter.
Right.
What's the source of that evidence? Because that is probably, to me, as an amateur historian, that was some of the most striking evidence you have.
Well, it's actually directly from Dr. Earl Rose's autopsy report.
It is.
He had 2 .38 revolver bullets, 2 .38 automatic bullets. I believe 3 of them were from the Winchester manufacturer and 1 was from Remington. So it's 2 different manufacturers on the 2 different bullets. What's kind of ironic is the standard police issue pistol in 1963 for the Dallas Police Department was a .38 automatic.
Okay, I lived in England around 2006, and I was watching a BBC presentation on the Kennedy killing, and they said unequivocally, not it was maybe or it was proposed, they said the driving force behind Kennedy's assassination was the mafia. And like you said, because they had something to gain. They wanted to, Bobby was going after them with full force.
Correct.
They wanted to get rid of Bobby. They knew if they did that, Jack would come after them with the full, everything that he could as the president. So they thought, we'll just kill Kennedy, John Kennedy. That gets rid of Bobby, because everybody knew that Bobby and Lyndon hated each other, and that would be the end of it. So I've always thought that that's who, that they were behind. That was the driving force.
Well, and here's what I will say about that. I firmly believe the mafia helped hire the guns, okay? But I didn't do it at this particular presentation, but most presentations that I speak at, I ask people right up front, okay? How many of you believe, by a show of hands, Oswald was guilty? And so certain people raise their hand. How many people believe, Oswald had an accomplice? And again, I'll get a few people raise their hands. How many people think Castro did it, or the Cubans, or the Russians? How many people think the CIA did it? How many people think the mafia did it? I usually ask those questions, and the answer that I would give back to you on that is there were 4 things that happened the day of the assassination that only our government controlled. Okay. First of all, the parade route was changed within 2 days of the motorcade. It wasn't originally supposed to go by the school book depository building. It's supposed to go straight down Main Street and go out to the Trade Mart by back roads instead of taking the Stemmons Freeway. The other thing that I will say is the Secret Service, from Thursday night at 8 p.m. until Friday at 12:30 when the assassination happened, the Secret Service violated 16 different rules of presidential protection, including going out drinking the night before the assassination. Anytime the car slowed down to less than 44 miles an hour or made a turn of 90 degrees or more, there were supposed to have been Secret Service agents on the running boards and the bumper of the car to protect the president from field of fire from 3 different directions. That didn't happen. The open windows, okay, you saw in the presentation there, 3 African Americans on the 5th floor looking out, and the 6th floor sniper's nest window, those windows were open, as well as many other open windows along the parade route. That's not allowed during a presidential motorcade, okay? The Secret Service has the right to basically take over the police department and the sheriff's department, and hey, if a window goes up, somebody goes in that building to find out what's going on. So again, they didn't do that. The biggest thing is, it wasn't a federal crime to assassinate the president in 1963, yet the Secret Service removed JFK's body from Parkland Hospital before they could do an autopsy, okay? And so when I go back to whether you think Oswald did it alone, or Oswald with an accomplice, or the Cubans, or the Russians, or the mafia, only our government could do all the things that I just explained to you, and only our government could get the Warren Commission appointed.
I have one other question. Oh, okay.
And by the way, the BBC is much better news than what we get here.
Good evening. Number one, I'd like to congratulate you on your wonderful presentation.
Well, thank you.
One question specifically is, you mentioned a moment ago, and Mr. Stone, who wrote a book years ago on this, also indicated that they found Oswald having lunch in the book depository building.
Right.
Now, I'd like your take on what happened from the time that he was having lunch in that building until the time he was arrested in the movie theater in the same town.
Right. Well, the first thing I'll say about that is he was spotted by 2 employees in the lunchroom at 12:26, okay? Now, here's what most people don't realize, okay? Kennedy was killed at 12:30 right here on Elm Street, okay? He was scheduled to speak at the Trade Mart at 12:30. His motorcade was actually running 15 minutes late, okay? If Oswald is the lone assassin, he would have no way of knowing that the motorcade is running late. He'd be up in that window waiting for the president to come by, Okay, he wouldn't be sitting there having his sandwich at 12:26. Okay, as far as him leaving the school book depository, I tried to retrace his routes in 2015. He supposedly left the school book depository building at 12:32. He walked approximately 5 blocks east, got on a bus. The bus was headed back west to Dealey Plaza. He rode the bus for about 2 blocks. It wasn't going anywhere because of the traffic. He got off of the bus, supposedly asked for a transfer, walked 3 blocks to the Greyhound bus station where he knew a cab would be. And after giving the first cab in line to a pregnant woman, he gets in a cab and goes out to his rooming house in Oak Cliff. But he's not dropped off at the rooming house. He gets dropped off 5 blocks from the rooming house and then walks back the 5 blocks. And he does all of that in 28 minutes.
Was he dropped off before he got to the rooming house? Do you know?
In my personal opinion, it wasn't him on the bus or in the cab. He was witnessed by Deputy Sheriff Roger Craig coming down the grassy knoll incline and getting into a green Nash Rambler station wagon.
Questions, comments, protests?
When the protests come, I'm handing the mic to Tim.
Wasn't the Nash Rambler station wagon owned by Ruth Payne?
Yeah. That's the rumor.
Okay. Now, another thing you said about Ruth Payne saying that she had gone grocery shopping on Sunday. Well, I was in the 7th grade living here in Texas in 1963 in November, and we had something in Texas at that time called the Blue Law, where most grocery stores were closed.
Right.
So that would have been kind of tough for her to do. And also the 2 caskets.
Hey, it's Steve, right?
Mike.
I talked to you earlier.
Yes.
You know about the fingerprint.
Yes.
At the sniper's nest. Yes. So some people may not know about this. They found a fingerprint in the sniper's nest where Lee Harvey Oswald supposedly was. They sent that fingerprint to the world-renowned fingerprint guy, the guy that was better than anybody at that time. He positively identified it as belonging to Malcolm Wallace, who was Lyndon Johnson's assassin, right? They sent it to the FBI. The FBI came back and said, it's not Malcolm Wallace's, and then conveniently lost the fingerprint.
Questions, comments, protests?
Yes, I've been curious, does there exist any kind of transcript of what Oswald actually said while he was being interrogated?
No, because Captain Fritz and Chief Curry claimed there wasn't room in the interrogation room for a stenographer. And here's the other thing, too. This is before 1966 when the Miranda rights were passed. Anything Oswald said in his interrogation would not have been admitted into court anyhow. He didn't have a lawyer present. I mean, he asked for a lawyer. He asked for John Apt out of New York City to represent him. Yeah, according to Curry and Fritz, there wasn't room in there for a stenographer to take his notes.
Well, in your conversations with Jim Lavelle, did he ever express to you or tell you exactly what Oswald said?
He said that he denied it at every opportunity, and I even, in my new book, I even put in there when Oswald was finally arraigned for the murder of the president at 1:30 in the morning, he actually said to, I can't remember the guy's name now, but the attorney that arraigned him for the death of the President Kennedy, he said, "What are you doing this for? This is a joke. What are you talking about?" I mean, he denied it at every opportunity that he got. And it's, I'm not saying anything bad about Dallas County or the police department, but Dallas County has had more overturned trials in the state of Texas than any other county since 2001. You didn't have DNA and everything back in 1963, but bottom line, if they wanted to railroad you in a crime, you got railroaded into a crime. Does anybody here know about Abraham Bolden? Okay.
Okay. IMO, this is just my opinion. I've watched many, many, many things on just anything I can find about the assassination, docuseries, whatever. And I just want to say, because some of the stuff you guys are saying, it sounds like it was from the men who killed Kennedy. That is one of the best docuseries I have ever seen.
I agree.
First-hand eyewitnesses are telling you what happened, but no one listens. And what I want to say is, I sit here every day and wonder why there is not a U.S. president who will open this investigation and take care of this. There is so many lies, so many things that are, and so my thought was, well, are they waiting for everybody with the Warren Commission to pass away?
That's already happened.
And yes, Gerald Ford was the last one who passed away.
Correct.
And I thought, is somebody scared for somebody that they're going to, come after him or something? But why doesn't, and I was hoping, I don't know, because I know President Trump talked about wanting to open stuff. But nobody does it. Nobody wants to open this up and find out the truth. There's so much. And now everybody's dead,
Right.
that's had anything to do with it.
And what you said about the men who killed Kennedy, it is one of the best documentaries out there.
See, I heard that a lot of people said a lot of that stuff wasn't true. But you're sitting here listening to these people tell firsthand eyewitness accounts, and why don't you believe them? And why do you think this is not a good docuseries?
Right.
I don't know.
And Robert Groden, on my DVD that's back there on the Innocence of Oswald, Robert Groden said, when I showed it to him, he goes, "This is the best documentary I've seen on the Kennedy assassination since the men who killed Kennedy." And as far as no president, wanting to open it up, well, I'll just put it to you this way. I met President Jimmy Carter back in February or March of this year. And you were allowed to ask him one question. And, he still has Secret Service protection, so he's doing a book signing. And so as he's signing my book, I said to him, I said, well, my question to you, Mr. President, is I'd like to talk to you about the assassination attempt you had on May 4th, 1979. And he just kind of looked at me and he goes, how do you know about that? And I said, well, the two people that, the Secret Service, said that was going to try to kill you, one guy's name was Raymond Lee Harvey, and the other guy's name was Oswaldo Ortiz. Okay, in 1979, funding was up for the House Select Committee on Assassinations again. This was the CIA's way of telling Jimmy Carter to keep your damn nose out of this. Okay, the funding didn't get approved. They released the report in 1979 and suggested that the Justice Department investigate it further, and here we are 43 years later, and nothing has been done.
In the back?
Okay. Someone who you never mentioned at all, a guy by the name of Woody Harrelson, I think we all know.
Oh, yeah.
Was Woody's dad found in the train yard, coming out of the train yard after the assassination?
Well, again, according to the men who killed Kennedy, there was a 95% chance that the tall tramp in the middle was Charles Harrelson. Charles Harrelson, was arrested for killing a federal judge here in Texas, and at the time of his arrest said that he had killed President Kennedy as well, and then recanted that testimony later. But yeah, according to the Men Who Killed Kennedy documentary series, it's about a 95% chance that the tall tramp was Charles Harrelson.
In the promotional information for this presentation, it mentioned Billy Saul Estes.
Yeah.
Tell us about him.
That's another, you'll have to come back for that.
Tease it.
Okay, go back to what now?
I said, you'll have to come back and have a program.
Oh, okay, on Billy Saul, yeah. Yeah, you could do a whole whole presentation on Billy Saul Les's and Bobby Baker's relationship with LBJ. Go online tomorrow or this weekend when you get a chance and go to oldlifemagazines.com and look up the November 8th, 1963 and the November 22nd, 1963 issue of Life magazine. They're all about Bobby Baker and Billy Saul Les's illegal operations with Lyndon Johnson. And this information was being fed to Time Life by the Kennedy brothers so that they could force Lyndon Johnson to resign the vice presidency. Okay, his ticket out was a sunny day on Elm Street.
In the back?
Well, let me say this on Harrelson. I personally met him.
Okay.
Okay? I bought an automotive repair shop in Richardson, Texas. And the guy who I bought it from introduced me to Mr. Harrelson. And there was a doctor in South Dallas who had a ranch up in Paris, Texas. And after the guy I bought the repair shop from disappeared in Houston, the FBI dug up the Paris ranch. It all sounds fishy, because supposedly Mike or something was involved with a senator, and he disappeared.
Are you talking about Senator Lowenstein?
Pardon?
Are you talking about Senator Lowenstein in
I don't know, but there was some stuff going on. I was innocently bought a repair shop, and my wife was told by an FBI guy who lived behind us there was 24-hour surveillance on that shop.
And it's ironic that
all of a sudden
Paris,
I buy this thing, and there's 24-hour surveillance.
and it's ironic too that in Paris, Texas, is where Ricky White discovered all of his father's documents as well.
Yeah, well, Doc Nichols used to have the ranch up there, and they dug it up, FBI. But there was a lot of savory characters around that repair shop. I'll tell you that. I moved it to Dallas.
Hello.
How you doing?
Okay, first of all, a confidential clearance is the lowest clearance, not the highest.
Okay.
It's confidential, it's secret, and it's top secret. I know this because I was in the military in '69 and I had a top secret clearance. Okay.
Okay.
And I don't believe that changed between '63 and '69. So you ought to change that on your presentation.
Well, I appreciate it.
I'm sure he just had the clearance because of the messages he had to receive.
Yeah, and
Those are probably
at
confidential messages.
At the same time, it's they go back to how the press reported that Oswald was capable of doing the shooting because he was a marksman in the Marines. Well, again, a marksman's the lowest rating you can get.
Exactly.
But it sounds good. He was a marksman.
Have a follow-up. Okay, I don't quite I've always thought that Tippit, his job was to kill Oswald, because if they arrested Oswald alive, their story would fall apart, which it did.
Right.
So I think Tippit's job was to kill Oswald. But I don't understand in your version that this other guy killed Tippit. Are you saying that Tippit never encountered Oswald over in Oak Cliff?
Correct. He never made it into the school book depository in time to basically kill Oswald.
Okay, so he went over to Oak Cliff to try to catch him over there where he lived.
Correct.
But you're saying that he didn't find Oswald. But see, Oswald, when he ran, he obviously knew they were trying to kill him, or why would he hide in a movie theater full of people? Well, he didn't want the police to kill him when they arrested him.
Well, as far as the movie theater goes, I firmly believe that if you wanted to speak with someone about, let's say that Oswald was involved in one way or the other, okay, and afterwards he needed to find out what his next, mode of transportation or where he goes or what he does next. Two places that you could go would be a movie theater or a library, because you could have a conversation there without having a conversation. And what I mean by that is if you're in a movie theater and I'm next to him and we're in a theater of 200 people watching a movie, If we're just whispering to each other, you don't know what I'm saying to him. In the same way with the library, I can give you information and just say, go check out Kill a Mockingbird and turn it over on page 348. When you get to page 348, I've left you an envelope there. I wasn't there, okay, but I left you information as to what to do. So I really believe that Oswald was at the movie theater, basically awaiting to see what else, what was going to happen next. Obviously, he also would feel safe there, knowing that, they're probably not going to, kill him in front of 200 witnesses or however many people were there. And it's interesting, too. I didn't even put it in the presentation, but it is in the book. They claimed Oswald, when he was being arrested, pulled his pistol and was going to shoot his way out. Yet the pistol misfired, okay? And when they did testing on his pistol at the Dallas police station, they found out that the firing pin didn't line up with the chamber. If it didn't line up with the chamber at 140, how did it work at 106 when he shot Tippit? I mean, does Oswald have superhuman strength that he can bend metal with his hand? Okay, so again, if it didn't work then, how did it work 30 minutes before? And the same way with the rifle. When they determined that it was Oswald's rifle with a 6.5 Mannlicher Carcano, they did independent testing on the rifle, and they had to put shims in and realign the scope, and then determined that it wasn't a reliable weapon. And the Italians call that weapon the humanitarian rifle because it can't kill anything. So.
Yeah, one quick one. One of the pieces of, quote, evidence against Oswald was the curtain rod story, right? He's
Correct.
carrying curtain rods. What are your thoughts on that part of the story?
Well, for one, if you get Robert Grodin's third book in his series, The Killing of a President, Absolute Proof, there are actual pictures in that book on November 22nd of Earlene Roberts, Oswald's housekeeper, hanging the curtain rods that he allegedly went out to get. And when Buell Frazier picked him up that morning and he looked over his shoulder and saw the curtain rods in the brown paper wrapping in the back, he asked Oswald, "What's that, Lee?" He goes, "That's the curtain rods. Remember I told you it's coming out to get the curtain rods." And when he arrived at the school book depository building, he put the curtain rods, cupped them in his hand, and the other was underneath his armpit. Well, I own a Mannlicher Carcano gun. And even the 40.2-inch version, when it's broken down, is 34 inches long. Okay, I'm a short guy. Okay, unless you're Ralph Sampson, I defy anybody to have 34 inches between the cup of their hand and their armpit. Okay, but again, the Warren Commission claimed that's how he snuck the gun in. Again, that's not the gun that was on record according to the affidavits.
This is Jeff Meek, who also wrote a very good book.
Guys, what's your take on the basis of the book Coup in Dallas, the Lafitte date book?
I just recently bought that about 3.5 months ago, and I'm only about halfway through it. Couldn't really give you an honest opinion. I think the research is really good, but again, I'm not completely through with it. My problem is, Jeff, I read 2 or 3 JFK books at a time. I have literally hundreds of books on the assassination, and the lady here that was talking about watching the men who killed Kennedy, I've got over 300 DVDs of Kennedy footage. So I'm like you. Even I'll watch something that I know the Warren Commission is fully supported, and it had to be Oswald, and I'll watch the whole thing anyhow because you know what? I'll find that one little clip or that one little piece of evidence that goes, eh. Okay, perfect example. Okay, again, it wasn't in the presentation. Chief Curry was driving the lead car in the motorcade. Okay, when Kennedy was shot, Chief Curry, instead of getting on the Simmons Freeway, had already moved over to the far left lane and was already circling back around to go to the school book depository building. He's supposed to be taking Kennedy to the Trade Mart. How did he know to turn around and go back to the school book depository building literally 10 seconds, 15 seconds after the shots occurred?
I did. Just for my trying to get logic in this, what you're saying is that probably the Russia connection was invalid. You know, that's been a theory that's been
Correct.
around for a long time, and that because JFK and Bobby were so tough on Russia, that they were that, you know, Oswald was a pawn, you know, in their hands. So in your mind, that is just something. How did that rumor get started?
Well, I mean, it got started basically by Johnson to appoint the Warren Commission so that we wouldn't have a third world war. Okay. On the day of Kennedy's funeral on November 25th, Jackie and Bobby Kennedy actually sent a family friend to Russia and spoke with members of the KGB and was trying to get information to Khrushchev to say, you know, they're going to try to bait you into this. Don't take the bait.
Huh.
You know, we know this
Okay.
was a domestic situation, a domestic assassination. Don't
Not
take
a-
the bait.
Okay. Okay.
I'm going to follow up on that, and then I'll let you quit. The
You know,
Okay.
at this age, Tom, we got to gather our thoughts.
One quick question. Have either of you received threats from the government for your work? Not yet.
He says not yet. I had the FBI call me in September of 2016. And it's kind of funny because I get a phone call one day and it's New York City, New York, and I'm like, I don't know anybody there. You know, so that's going to voicemail. And I get the message, and you can tell it's a robocall. But the robocall, you know, I'm thinking September 2016, I'm thinking the phone call is going to be vote for Hillary or vote for Trump. Well, the message was, we've been trying to reach you, and to clear up an issue with a federal agent, call back this number immediately. So I'm like, okay. So I call back the number. They answer the phone, New York office of the FBI. And I said, yeah, I just got a phone call from there. They said, who is this? I said, you called me. And so about 15 seconds later, a guy comes on. He goes, Mr. Fannin? I said, yeah. He goes, this is Agent so-and-so, the New York office of the FBI. He goes, I'd like to talk to you about your book. I said, all right. I said, what do you want to know? He goes, well, you have a photograph in there and a document in there that's never been released to the public, and I want to know how you got them. I said, okay. I said,
you better watch it. You know what happened to Dorothy.
So he says, I said, you know, what photograph are you talking about? And he goes, I think he said page 22, and I looked at it, and I said, well, obviously you haven't read my book. I said, because if you read my book, you'd know that's a recreation. That was when Stephen King filmed his miniseries 11/22/63 here in 2014. The Lincoln that they use in that miniseries, which was also in the Oliver Stone movie JFK, my friend Nick Shisheli owned that car. And so he said to me, he goes, hey, I'm going to be out there filming. You might want to come get some pictures and photographs and pictures and video for your book. So I told the guy, you haven't read my book because that's a recreation. Well, that tells me right there, they've got that picture somewhere, if he's telling me that it hasn't been released to the public. And then on the document was actually a document from the CIA to the Secret Service that admitted that Lee Harvey Oswald was a CIA contract agent and an informant for the FBI. And that when he went to Russia in 1959, we sent him there. He did not defect.
To follow up on your comment, then former Vice President Nixon was in Europe at the time of the assassination, and he called just a few days after the assassination, he called his friend J. Edgar Hoover and said, who did this? And these were Edgar Hoover's exact words, a communist. A communist. So one of the interesting things about this, she mentioned Russia, is this whole de Morinshit, who was born in Russia.
Correct.
And was over there with the Oswalds. I think that's one of the most intriguing chapters of the assassination, but unfortunately a lot is lost.
Well, and I'll go into a conversation about de Morinshit here in a second, too.
Just to piggyback what you said, Gary, when I did the research for my book, which is a deep dive into the CIA, I found a CIA document with my name in it in 9 places. So they definitely watch us.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. I know they do. And like I said, there'll be times when I'm on the phone and, you know, the people on the other end will be like, what is that clicking noise? I'm like, I don't hear anything. You know, Big Brother's listening in. Oh, hold on.
Yeah, I just want to comment on your question about are we afraid or have we been contacted? You know, when Gary wrote his first book, it was just basically about, I mean, it proves that Oswald had nothing to do with it. But for the second book, when we started to write it, the premise of the book is who stood to lose if Kennedy had lived. And the chapters are all, and we say right up front, we're not pointing fingers, we're just saying these people, these individuals, or these organizations stood to lose. And the chapters of the book, CIA, Secret Service, Dallas Police, the Mafia, blah, blah, blah. So as we finished the book, my girlfriend said to me, are you worried somebody might come after you? And I said, well, if I disappear one day and you never hear from me again, or if I suddenly get arrested for selling cocaine, right, you'll know what's going on, right? So who knows what could happen. It's been, Gary talked about Abraham Bolden, very clearly set up, spent 16 years in jail for something he never did because he was trying to bring out the fact that the Secret Service under John F. Kennedy was, they didn't care about him, they wouldn't take bullets for him, they were drinking on the job, they were derelict in their duties. He was trying to make that known to his superiors, and they found out, sent him to prison for 16 years on trumped-up charges.
And I talked to him, and he was going to be here this month, but he had the unmitigating gall of having a heart attack.
Yeah.
He was going to come down for our program.
Yeah. Abraham's 87, and he's not in the best of health. I mean, he's already buried his wife and 2 of his children. And he, thankfully, in April 26th of this year, finally got a pardon from President Biden after 60 years.
I'm sure you guys are familiar with the connections between Des Moines Shield and Bush 41.
Oh, yeah.
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 It's kind of interesting. And
it's actually the letter to Des Moines Shield to Bush when he was CIA director, and George Bush's response back to Des Moines Shield is in the new book as well.
Yeah, and the fact that when they were the Bay of Pigs invasion, the code name for that was Operation Zapata. And that was the name of Bush's oil company based in Midland. Then he moves it to Houston, and the 2 landing craft that our government gave the Cubans to land on the Bay of Pigs beach, they named them Barbara and Houston.
Correct.
Now, I'm not a conspiracy buff, but it makes more sense to be a conspiracy buff than a coincidence buff.
I'll go on top of that. Do you know who his number 2 man was at Zapata Oil Manufacturing?
Okay, it is.
John Hinckley Sr. Oh, wait a minute. What happened March 30th, 1981? Oh, yeah. This is great, too, by the way. When Reagan's assassination attempt happened, do you know where George Bush was? He was at the Fort Worth, Texas hotel that now is the Hilton. The night that JFK spent his last night alive, he was there naming it a National Historic Landmark. So he's supposed to go to Austin to give a speech there, and on the way to Austin, he finds out that the assassination attempt has happened on Reagan, and so he orders the plane to land and refuel. They cancel the speech. He sequesters Reagan's cabinet to the White House Situation Room so that they don't talk to the press. He arrives back to Andrews Air Force Base, arrives by helicopter to the White House, meets with the cabinet, goes on TV at 8 o'clock that night, and I swear to you on my father's grave, this is what he said. There's no reason to investigate this John Hinckley fellow any further. He's just another lone nut like Lee Harvey Oswald. Why are you telling us not to investigate the guy that just tried to kill your boss? Because they're directly tied. In our book back there, his brother, Hinckley's brother was scheduled to have a Republican fundraising dinner with Bush's son, Neil Bush, the following day in Colorado. Well, needless to say, they had to cancel that. That wouldn't look good.
I just wondered if you had any comment on Oswald's phone call that he should get, but he did not get to have his phone call. It was intercepted, supposedly.
Well, supposedly he called Ruth Payne and asked for her to contact the attorney John Apt to be his attorney, and that if she couldn't get a hold of John Apt, he wanted a ACLU attorney to represent him. But he also made another phone call to North Carolina that's also been documented as well.
And I have to follow up, and this will be the last comment on that. I asked the last living counsel for the Warren Commission about this phone call. And I said, because we'd had a speaker here that has attracted now 4.8 million views, we had a speaker here, Dr. Grover Proctor, talk about this phone call.
Right.
And I asked the counsel, I said, how come the Warren Commission did not thoroughly investigate that phone call? I would have wanted Oswald to go ahead and talk, see what he had to say to this man, see what that man had to say to him. He said, I don't know what you're talking about, and he walked off.
Right.
Thank you, Gary Fannin.